In this episode of Logos Over Lunch, I speak with Douglas Harp. He is the principal of Harp Company in Hanover, New Hampshire, and also teaches design at Colby-Sawyer College. I have to be honest, I sat on this interview for months. It's not that the conversation went badly, far from it. It was phenomenal. The problem was, I got intimidated. As designers, we're all formed by our influences. Those influences can be experiences as well as people. And after listening to the interview the first time through, I realized that Doug had 3 lifetimes full more amazing influences than I could ever imagine for myself. Well, you'll see what I mean in this interview. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I've done it justice. Well, the most obvious question is, how did you get interested in design? Like, what is it? Was it a childhood thing? Was it a?
Yeah. It's ridiculous how long I've been interested in design without really knowing that it was called graphic design. I can literally trace my interest in letters back to second grade, summer after second grade. Our whole family went up to Port-au-Choix, Newfoundland, where my father was doing a big dig. He was an archaeologist. And one of his students really was into drawing letters and drawing Old English letters. So I actually remember that summer learning how to draw, I guess, I don't know if it was my initials or whatever, but so something about type, I always drew, I've always drawn. Both my parents painted. So I somehow got interested in letter forms. I got my first real dose at age 15. I was going to, my sister and I were going on a trip to France with our school, and every student had to earn, I don't know, $150 toward the airline ticket to help our parents out, and the people running this overseas program helped us find jobs. We told them on an application what we were interested in, and I must have said something like calligraphy, because people were buying me calligraphy pens, and I was in little speedball books that I could copy letters from. And the guy who was running the trips, amazingly, I think this is somebody who really was doing his job. He got me an interview with John Scottford, who at the time was assistant director of Hopkins Center, the brand new Hopkins Center for the Performing Arts at Dartmouth College. And he was also heading the Hopkins Center Design Associates. So back in those days, we're talking about mid to late 60s, when, Simon and Garfunkel came to town, or, various classical events, and the Association came, and Richie Havens. All of those posters were designed by him and by students working in the studio and silk screened. They were all done as limited editions. A big, beautiful, no such thing as an 11 by 17 poster. And I interviewed, and he gave me a job. So I had this after school job. I learned how to, they had me doing sort of grunt stuff, but for me, it was a thrill. I learned how to use the photostat machine. It's very difficult to describe to anybody, a young designer today, what that is. They taught me how to use the typositor. I don't know if you're old enough to, but where you're setting one letter at a time, and spinning a roll of film and getting to the right letter and getting it letter placed properly and looking through a thing, and then you hit a button and a light shines through and it prints it on paper, on a strip of paper. And then those strips of paper were rubber cemented together into the copy for the book. So they taught me how to do that. So when I went to college, I thought I was still potentially interested in architecture, but I majored in visual and environmental studies. I took every graphic design class that I could. So I couldn't major in it per se, but I studied with a man named Toshihiro Katayama, who was, I think, quite well known at the time. He was good buddies with Rudolph Arnheim, and I had a chance to do a 3-week course with Jan Lenica, a Polish poster designer, an animator who had actually been an artist in residence at Dartmouth. And I'd gotten to meet him there. And then, like, 3 years later, 4 years later, I'm actually studying with him. So that was a thrill. That was one of the other amazing things about that job, is that I was exposed to these incredible artists in residence. One of them was named Will Carter, who had hand carved these teak commemorative panels that are placed around Hopkins Center for, this gallery, donated by this person and stuff. And the artist in residence house was diagonally across the street from where I grew up. So our families got to know each other very well. And after high school, I bummed around Europe with a couple of buddies and ended up spending a week visiting Will Carter and his family in Cambridge, England. So I was, they had something called the Rampant Lions Press down in the basement, and he and his son Sebastian, printed limited edition books on, I'd never seen letterpress before. So, and he took me to Ely Cathedral, where he was carving letters in a stone, a slab of stone that was a part of the cathedral. So I mean, it was the most, I just, ridiculously fortunate to be exposed to these kinds of things. So why am I interested in letter forms, and why am I teaching typography? Because I just had it hitting me from all sides, in my youth. So I thought, okay, I want to apply to graduate school, but not now. Couldn't imagine doing it. So I'm skipping a lot of stuff that, I just did unusual stuff in those 4 years. But I was living in the Canadian Arctic, basically. And my then fiance and I came down, got married, and thought we were done with the Arctic. And there was a job opening at the Hopkins Center studio as the assistant manager of the studio. And I thought, got that one. I didn't get the job. And I just thought, oh my God, I thought I had this great portfolio, which was truly not a great portfolio. And I didn't get the job. And I had sort of been waiting for this feeling, a kick in the pants, to say, maybe it's time to go to graduate school. That was the kick in the pants that I needed. So we actually went back up north, where we could both make and save a fair amount of money. We were up on Baffin Island for that last year, 78 and 77, 78. And I applied to graduate schools from up there. So I applied to Yale. I made it through the first cut. I flew down. I had an interview there. And on that same trip, I had an interview at RISD, and I had an interview at School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And we spent most of my interview at Yale with Alvin Eisenman talking about the Canadian Arctic and the Eskimo. He knew more about it than I did, because that's the kind of amazing person he was. He was talking about the history of the syllabic alphabet that had been developed by missionaries in Labrador in the late 19th century, so that they could, so that the Inuit people could have, prayer books and hymn books in the syllabic alphabet. So, and be converted. So we spent the entire interview talking about that stuff. And he said, I think you have raw talent. I mean, it was pretty clear. It was a pretty lame portfolio. I mean, he could see that I could draw. I had done some design. I had my few things from my undergraduate years in there, and he saw something there. So his interest was putting together a class of 14 people whom he felt would get along together and feed each other and be an interesting group of people. So, I consider myself incredibly, incredibly fortunate to have been accepted there, because all of the rock stars, but this was 1979. So every third person on the sidewalk was not a graphic designer or didn't know how to use InDesign, and then called themselves a designer, because obviously it didn't exist. So the world was not crawling with graphic designers then. And, Paul Rand and Armin Hoffman and Chris Pullman and Tom Eckersley, poster designer from London, and Dorothea Hoffman and Inga Druckery and Alvin Eisenman, these people, they all taught there. Brad Thompson, they were all teaching at Yale at the time. So it's just unbelievable. I didn't know who any of them were when I went there, but by the time I left, I knew I'd been blessed to have had those 2 years. Oh, Rudy de Harak taught there, Rudolph de Harak. So, and I went to work for him for 2.5 years afterwards. So, I mean, that was an unbelievable experience. So, I'm a pretty lucky guy, in terms of that stuff, you know. So I should stop
Wow.
talking and give you a chance to talk.
That's like 150 years of education that you
Yeah,
received somehow
yeah,
in a
crazy.
very short span.
Yeah,
Now I'm going to get into logo questions for
sure.
you now. So, you know, and I think I know the answer already because of the just your after you explain the rich background and the different influences. But when I look at your logos, there's such a wide variety of treatments and styles. I mean, you look equally adept at working in a modernist style. Uh, it, Thinking of the World Kitchen that I saw of yours, and then at the same time, you look really comfortable in a very humanist, hand drawn style,
Right.
like I'm not even going to say it right. Kawachin,
Oh, Kawachen.
Kawachin. I mean,
Yeah,
that one is
sure, the Tibetan rugs.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean that one is so flowing and hand drawn, and then
yeah,
you compare that with the World Kitchen, which is minimalist to
yeah,
some extent.
yeah.
Um, how are you able to work on both sides of that? Because from my looking at logo designers, some have really distinct styles. They stay in a certain lane, and your variety is it's refreshing or it's unique. I think.
Well, thank you. I think, I mean, I've been influenced by so many people. So I studied with modernists like Rudolph de Harak, you know, and um, and I studied with Paul Rand, who pulls out a pair of scissors and cuts things, by hand, or picks up a paintbrush and does something with a paintbrush. And I guess I never forgot that. Um, when I'm teaching now, the idea of picking up scissors and cutting something out and having that actually be the the sort of the heart of the solution is just like the students just don't know what I'm talking about. But I think that's the simple answer. The influences that I mean, and I mean, there's this very strong Swiss bent, at Yale. I assume there still is. I'm not sure, but there certainly was back then. So, I mean, Armin Hoffman was very spare in his designs. If you look at Giselle, that one of his posters, it's a ballet, I think. Just exquisitely spare, black and white, just strong typography. But then you look at Paul Rand. Paul Rand will do stuff like the little bow on the UPS package. Even though that was clearly rendered very carefully. It was the concept of it was simple and very humanistic. That bow, and that was his daughter. If you know that story, his daughter said, "Why didn't you put a bow on it, Daddy?" Because he had just put a package on top of the shield, the heraldic shield. And he listened to his daughter, and he put a little bow on it, and that made it a gift. Like a so that's how I was exposed to this wide array of styles and was influenced by these people. And I think that more importantly to me is that everybody I studied with sort of inculcated in all of us that these designs have an idea behind them. The World Kitchen, um, the red line underneath the dish shape. That was actually, I have to say, I absolutely credit my late wife with that. She said, "Why don't you make it red?" And I thought, "Oh God, of course," because it's like a heating element, or just an accent color. But there's more of it. The Coyote Loco, I don't know if that you'll see that if you don't recall that, but it's that was an identity for a restaurant in Ithaca, and that was in the early 90s. And for some reason, the coyote became very iconic in designs in the early 90s. And everywhere you looked, people were sticking coyotes in, and they always had bandanas on for some damn reason, you know. And I just thought it was kind of arbitrary, but yet I had to do something with a coyote. Okay. And I was very comfortable with scissors and paper. So I thought crop in on the head of the coyote. And I'm really wandering a lot here, but I think for me, this is an interesting story for people who are interested in design. You know, I had just from about somewhere near the ears up, you know, and then put in that triangle that represented the eye. And it was this, and then the moon was a pepper, a yellow pepper, you know, that the coyote was baying at. And I was very influenced by, people like Ivan Chermayeff, you know, the stars, you know, were like, I just copied Ivan Chermayeff's style of drawing or cutting stars. I just loved it. They were all wobbly and kind of funky and misshapen, but they were stars. And the typeface was, I think, Baby Teeth by, let me get out of the sun again here, Milton Glaser, you know, and so I cut my own letters to spell Coyote Loco. But my point, so I'm moving on to another point here, and that is that I loved it when people looked at my work and look at my work and see something that I didn't see, as long as it's relevant or germane. Okay, so in this case, somebody looked at that and said, "Oh, is that a mesa?" And I thought, "No, but that's okay. You know, that's relevant. You know, if they said, "Is that a parking meter?" I would have thought, "Okay, I failed." And that's happened a lot of times. You know, you mentioned the Kawa-Chen thing. It just, I don't remember what the typeface is that I use for the logo, but it was just completely a brush, and I knew that those clouds were kind of an iconic Tibetan sort of symbol. And Kawa-Chen, God, I think it has something to do with a mountain, or holy mountain, I believe. But anyway, so that just the two strokes that made that mountain, I felt that something that felt very calligraphic made sense. You know, when I did an identity for Cayuga Medical Center at Ithaca, I wanted to combine those two sort of very hard-edged, modernistic approach with something that was more humanistic. So there's a paintbrush C that reverses out of that red square on point. So yeah, if every one of my answers is going to be 20 minutes long, you're only going to be able to ask about 2 questions. Sorry.
No, but I mean, you're leading to a lot of, I have a list of questions. You've probably answered, you know, 10 out of the 15 with the 3 answers that you've already given. So you're knocking things off my list. But process-wise, you know, I find it so interesting because of how many influences you've had from, you know, from the old English lettering that you're talking about from 2nd grade, all the way up to Paul Rand cutting things out of paper. Now, it makes me wonder, like, how your process works. You know, like, I don't know if you would call it old school. I mean, I always start with a notebook. But
yep.
But at the same time, I mean, it sounds like you're equally, you know, do you start with a notebook, or do sometimes you start off with black paper and just start, you know, I'm not going to even, well, I am going to bring up color aid paper because most of the people are going to have no idea what that is either.
Of course. Yes. I mean, the Coyote Loco was cut out of color aid paper. Yeah. Yeah. Always a pencil and paper. Always, always, always. I do not design on a Mac. I could not design on a Mac, but obviously much of the work that comes out of the studio ultimately is put together, obviously, on an iMac. Nope, pencil, idea, you know, somehow it goes from there to here to the paper. And I just make lots of sketches. I mean, I sometimes brainstorm with other people. My wife now, Susan, also named Susan, and I will sometimes brainstorm together on a project. My first wife and I did a lot of that together. Sometimes I would bounce stuff off my boys, who are both artists and designers. And then my process is I'll rarely do I show any of those sketches to a client. So those sketches go, I tighten those up. We usually promise clients, 3 to 5 different ideas if we're doing a logo or symbol. And I tighten those up, and then I sit with my associate, Jen, and who's been with me for going on 18 plus years. And I think Jen is my Bert. Paul Rand had his assistant Bert, who must have known how he thought and his processes. And Jen and I have this, I think, really, really great team. And she's completely facile with the technology because she doesn't know the world any other way. That's when she was at Colby-Sawyer in their design program. And so she then translates my sketches into tight Macintosh sketches. Okay. Sometimes they absolutely are supposed to have a hand-drawn element. So I go to my favorite tool, which is the copier, and I can blow stuff up and get the texture of a pencil line that I want. And then, scan those things and send those to Jen, and Jen puts those things together and adds color and stuff. But, the one, and then they're presentable to clients. But one instance, and I'm sure there are others, where I actually just showed the client the sketch. And this is the kind of serendipitous thing that I love to talk with my students about, because it's so critical that you learn to recognize this kind of thing that just happens. You weren't consciously thinking about it when you did it, but you have to look at it and say, whoa, I gotta work on that idea, or that idea, that's it, it's done. When I took the hole out of the word ozone, I thought, that's it, that's the design, period. Just that is the concept. But I was sitting, this is when I was still at Corning. They had an annual boat and camper show, of all things to have at the Corning Glass Center. I'm not sure why that ever happened, but they showed me the poster from the previous year, and it was this classic, badly designed, it was wonderful, it was so badly designed thing that had every camping and boating cliche clip art thing it could possibly have. Somebody water skiing, somebody sailing, somebody in a tent. And it was like something out, Michael Beirut would love to talk about this. It was like something out of an old Life magazine, all these, as to use his word, these yucky things, but it was hilarious. And right then and there, literally on a napkin, my reaction to that was I drew a little triangle and a little boat. Just a hull. I don't know if the boat show poster, if you're familiar with that, that's one of my favorite designs that I've ever done, because it's the essence, I think, of in my book, what design should do. It should delight. It should make you go, oh, I get it. So I did that as a reaction to this horrible thing that they'd been showing me. And I showed them that completely undeveloped raw sketch. And they sort of politely said, oh, sure, okay. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but it felt incomplete. So I did little pencil sketches. I might have pulled my scissors out, now I'm back in the studio, and I put a sun in there. Okay. So I'm thinking, it's going to be a white sail. The boat's going to be red, because I really love that very, very simple palette, that sort of international style palette, bold, simple colors. And I thought it's still missing something, because all of a sudden it looked like a face, but there was something missing. So I put in the seagull, and that was a winking eye. And the boat, because it looked like a nose and a smile for this very simplistic this simple little sketch of a boat. And there was the sun for one eye, and there was the bird. And I just thought, this is, that's it. And then I was super influenced by Ivan Chermayev's lettering, his wobbly hand lettered posters. I just really revered his work. And so I I hand lettered it in a calculatedly wobbly style. That's a really popular thing now, and they're all digitized, and there are all kinds of hand lettering things you can do. But that's one of the things I pounded to my students. If you want something hand lettered, don't go find some digital font that somebody else did. Do it yourself. Just hand letter it yourself, and it will be unique.
All right. I got no more questions for you.
I got no more answers.
And you got a turkey in the oven.
Yeah, I got a turkey in the oven. Let me see.
You got a little time.
No, I'm sorry. I have 17 and a half more minutes, Chris.
Oh, that's one answer.
No, this has been a ton of fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Same here.
Let me know when you turn it off, because I want to talk about a couple of other things,
All right. I'm gonna turn it off right now.
Okay, cool. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.